Are you here with us?
Hi, this is Neal with Graveside Paranormal Tours, GravesideParanormal.com, Graveside Paranormal on YouTube. How's everybody liking the tour tonight? Adam, are you here? Talk to us.
Hello everyone, this is Neal with Spirits by the Graveside, presented by Graveside Paranormal. Today's date is 3/4/2021. The date of which this will be broadcast is on 3/7/2021 at 7 p.m. Central Time in the Chicagoland area right off the bat. Tonight we are going to have one hell of a show, and the word hell is very prominent here, let me tell you. We are going to be talking about Amityville with Mr. Paul Garratt-Proctor, and we're going to talk a little bit about his book in the beginning, and then we're going to go right into Amityville, the horror of Amityville. But as always, before we get started, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, let us open up what we're going to drink today. Today I have Red Bull, sugar-free. I'm a diabetic, so I got to do this. It's actually a little early in the morning because I'm talking into the UK today with Paul Garratt. We are about 6 hours apart, so it's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon there, and that's 10 o'clock in the morning here. I do not drink early in the morning. After 7 o'clock, it's all crazy after that, though, after 7 o'clock. Jack Daniels, Bud Light, whatever I gotta have. So here we go. Cheers to everybody. God bless. Here we go. A little sip. Let's get this day started. In the news today, on 2/15/21, a Louisiana man captured some unusual footage, a series of strange pulsing orbs across power lines. You can check out the video on Weird News, the HuffPost. It's very odd what happened. It's a big flux. It looks like orbs flying all around near the power lines. It was very interesting what I saw. Of course, it's just electrical flux. There's really anything paranormal, but if somebody was to look over, they'd be like, oh my God, what in the hell is that? All right, next on to the next thing. For those who like Jeepers Creepers movies, which I do, me and my wife, we watched that first one together, and we were like, oh my God, I hope this man does not exist. They are making out a new 4th movie, and it is a reboot. So they're going to probably be adding new storyline to it. Of course, I'm going to watch it, but I hate reboots. I hate things like that. But I will watch it because it is Jeepers Creepers, because I think it is just one hell of a story. Now, we're talking in the UK, so ironically, a UK story came up. So now all my new friends in the UK, I'm going to throw out this story to you. Out of the UK, Backyard Brew House. Lottery officials reached out to the Backyard Brew House, based in Walsall, England, to produce 100 bottles of the blonde ale to find the winner of a 1.39 million euro millionaire jackpot, which expires on March 17, 2021. So 1 year ago, my friends in the UK, they had the ticket out there, which is $1.39 million. They had where you have now until March 17th, which is only going to be about 10 days away. So I hope you hear this broadcast and you find your ticket, and or go to the backyardbrewhouse.com and see what they have that they can help you out with. One other thing that I saw today, Ghostbusters. They now have the Ghostbusters box where it has incense in it. You can put incense, and I love incense. I love all those oils. Those are so cool. And me and my wife, we love smelling those before we go to bed or while we're sleeping. But now they have the Ghostbusters box. I believe it's through numbskull.com. I think it's only $59.99. I'm definitely going to buy one because I have to. But that is the news for today. Thank you for listening to the news of today. But let's get into what we really want to talk about, boys and girls. Amityville. Amityville, Long Island, 112 Ocean Avenue, 1 hour from New York City. 6 members of the Defeo family were killed on November 13th, 1974. Ronnie Defeo Jr. killed his father Ronald Sr., 43. Louise, the mother, was 43, and his 4 siblings, Dawn, 18 at the time, Allison, 13, Mark, 12, and John Matthew, 9, were all shot and killed by a .35 caliber lever-action Marlin 336C rifle at around 3:15 in the morning. 1 year later, after the tragic death of the Lutz family, bought and occupied the home for only 28 days. Only 28 days they lived there, ladies and gentlemen. George Lutz and Kathy Lutz gathered their 3 children and left their home due to the paranormal forces at work that was causing negative influences on the family. Many books and movies have been written since the tragic deaths of this Dutch colonial home. At the end, I will give my opinion of the Amityville home. I must give a disclosure on this one. All opinions by Graveside Paranormal is by Graveside Paranormal. Paul Garratt, he will give his opinions on it. Because I know that there's a lot of people out there who they talk one side of the story, the other side of the story, and I don't want to anger anybody. We are only based off the research that we use and we find. So at no time am I going to say that this happened or that happened. I only am based off the research that I find. So I wanted to make sure I put that disclosure out there. Now I want to welcome in Paul Garratt and Kit Proctor. Garratt-Proctor, am I correct on that, Kit?
Yeah, we're double barrel.
We're double barrel, man.
Both Garratt-Proctor, yeah.
Right. All right, so I want to welcome you in. You have the book, Gateway of Evil. Amityville, Gateway of Evil. I'm showing this right here.
Yeah.
Can I read the back end of it for you real quick?
By all means, please do, certainly.
Sure. Pray there's no place like home. When Neela, Beg, and her family moved to their newly renovated home, life seems to be turning around after several difficult years. However, seemingly inexplicable events start to plague Nyla and those dearest to her. With the relentless and deadly force, in desperation, Nyla turns to Tabitha, a psychic, with her own experiences of the horrors of the notorious house on Ocean Avenue, Amityville. Experiences that she dared not reveal. Tabitha soon realizes that she cannot save either herself or the Bags unless she is prepared to form an uneasy alliance with her greatest rival and nemesis. An increasingly desperate bid to stop the demonic power that feeds on terror and death. 3 women have to stand alone against the forces of evil that grow stronger by the hour, threatening to engulf them all. I welcome in Paul Garratt and Kit. Welcome today on Graveside Paranormal's Spirits by the Graveside. How are you today?
Very well, thank you.
Good.
Really good, thank you.
Did I say that well enough?
That was great.
Good. I'm glad. Did I pronunciate that name correct? Nyla or Nayla? Nyla. All right. So I was pretty good on that. I wasn't too bad on that. Now.
Indeed.
So what I want to do is I want to talk about the book first off. Tell us a little bit about the book, Paul.
Sure. Well, this is something that you could say it's 30 years in the making.
Yep.
Because I actually started playing around with this idea at the age of 12. And I've kind of picked it up and put it down many times over the years. And it was always my dream to create one addition to the Amityville fiction that has been done by numerous people over the years. And as the years have gone on, I've seen an increased demand by the fans of the Amityville franchise for something that brings it back to the original concept of a story in that famous house.
Okay.
Taking us away from these stories of, there was a good one about the lamp that was possessed and went to another part of America. That was good. Mm-hmm. But then after that, it's silly. They exhausted the idea. And before you know it, we got tons of stories that had nothing to do with the original concept. So really I wanted to create something for the fans that they would enjoy,
mm-hmm.
Purely for entertainment value, and in the way that, yeah, this is what it's really all about, you know. But it was really last year that the two of us started really talking, you know, and here I am, you know, married to an English teacher with numerous qualifications in creative writing, script writing, you know, and it just suddenly occurred, why don't we do this together?
So it was,
and that's what we...
Okay, and so it was both of you that came together to make the book,
yes,
Amityville, Gateway of Evil. Kit,
yes.
And so you were the English teacher who brought forth, I'm assuming, the writing of the book.
Yes, indeed. I mean, this is really something that came out of the COVID crisis, really, a positive thing in the sense that we sat down and we thought, you know, as with many people last year and also this year, we've had a lot of time at home and some additional time. And in conversation, I said, well, you know, I'm looking for a project this year to work on. I always try and have a writing project on the go, particularly in the summer school vacation. And I know that Paul had always been going back and revisiting his story and his idea and his concept. And so I said, well, you know, let's work on it together, and that's what we did. And it flowed beautifully, actually. We would, you know, I would write, we would meet up, we would evaluate, I'd go back, I'd work on it, and we worked out a narrative together. I mean, I came very much from the perspective of not being a horror aficionado, and certainly not as conversant with the lore surrounding the Amityville horror. I read Anson's book and some of the other writing on it, and obviously Paul has filled me in on a lot of the details in the background. But my perspective was really to think about trying to create a ghost story, to come up with something which hopefully stands apart from it has that.
So, Kit, I would say like your collaboration was basically the imagination of Paul and your, well, writing skills. Am I correct on that?
Yes, very much the idea that, you know, Paul came to me with the story outline, and it was a challenge to, you know, to establish characters and scenarios and you know, play around with what would work. So very much it was a case I'd sort of craft away at certain elements, and then we'd sit down and we'd discuss what seemed to work, and making sure that I was true to Paul's initial concept, and obviously his detailed understanding of what would fit and seem authentically to be a book that would sit in that canon.
Okay, that sounds good. All right. Now, I always ask this one question before we really start. Now, I'll start with you first, Paul. How did you get into the paranormal? Did anything significant ever happen to you in life where you started getting into the interest of Amityville as well as just maybe the paranormal, because you're a psychic, am I correct?
That's right, by trade, yeah, actually, at the moment, yeah, certainly. It's really always been a fascination more than anything, you know, and certainly, I mean, as regards to knowing Amityville over here, I think that goes to show how well known the stories are throughout the world. And, you know, it's always been sort of, you know, one of the films would be on the TV or something like that, so I noticed it in that respect. I would say throughout my life, yeah, I have had some strange, unexplainable experiences that, you know, I mean, they wouldn't sell stories, put it that way. You know, they wouldn't make people go, wow, if I was to tell them. But they are enough to convince me that there's, you know, that the world is not black and white. And, you know, that there are things that just defy logic. And that, you know, some people say there's always got to be an explanation, you know. Well, clearly there isn't. You know, not for everything. Not for everything.
Yes. You're absolutely right. What about you, Kit? Did you ever have anything paranormal happen to you?
I wouldn't say specifically anything paranormal. I think certainly what I've learned from Paul is to be much more open-minded in terms of allowing the possibilities for anything, really. And certainly through things that I've seen Paul do in his work, I, you know, sometimes things seem to happen, and you think, well, you can file a lot of things under the label of coincidence, but some things actually defy that, don't they? So I think never say never and always have an open mind on things. Really, is the only sensible approach.
Right, and I totally agree. Is just say have an open mind. I come across people who they don't believe it, and that's fine. Everybody to their own selves, this and that. But let's get right into it. Now, Paul, let's start with the Defeo. And Kit, just so if you want to talk about this, of any of the research that you did, feel free to come in. Are you there?
Yes, sure.
Okay. All right, I just want to make sure, just so the audience knows, we were having a little bit of electrical problems or electronic problems, so I just want to make sure that they're there because I saw a light go out on something. Okay. All right, let's start with the Defeo family, Paul and Kit. As everyone knows, Ron Defeo Jr., Butch, killed his family on November 13th, 1974. Do you think before the Defeo murders occurred, there was a presence already in the home influencing the family's emotion and physical actions towards each other?
That is certainly a theory of mine, yes. That what we seem to, or could be looking at is that it wasn't a conventional haunting, as in they would see ghosts or, strange things would happen, furniture would move, doors would open. But it would appear that there was a very, very negative energy in that house, and that many would put down to, well, they were a volatile family. They were always fighting over one thing and another, and it was just that, but as regards to this being something there, I would say yes. Yeah, I really would.
Something unseen.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Something that, most people wouldn't regard as, oh, well, that doesn't sound like a haunting, because they didn't see a ghost or they didn't, kind of hear any strange noises. Well, of course, better than most people that there's no such thing as a textbook haunting.
No, there's not.
They can be very psychological and very personal, and it's not what people would expect them to be.
Right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Something could have been there. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
One of the things is that I try to explain to people when I'm doing investigations or I'm doing tours through the Chicagoland area, is that negativity breeds more negativity. And they're just waiting for you. And I explain it like this, is that either through drugs, alcohol, or whatever, you don't believe in yourself, a depression, what it does is it opens up a little veil. It opens up a little cut or a veil in the world that we live in. And these things seem to creep inside. You don't know it. You don't have to see, like you said, we don't see Casper the Friendly Ghost, but there are outside influences on ourselves that do happen.
That's right.
Let's take, for instance, let's talk about Ronnie Defeo Sr., because we are talking about the subject of the negativity. Some people don't know about that Ronnie Defeo Sr., 6 months before the murders, he went out to, what country did he go to? And please elaborate on it.
Oh, good grief, you're asking me something now. I can't remember exactly where he went.
Oh, no, it's fine. What it was is, the 6 months before the murder, he went and got an exorcist. Why would he do that?
Well, precisely, why would he do that? You wouldn't bring someone of that nature into a home that was just full of people arguing, would you?
Right.
You wouldn't do that. And it's also said that around the same time he was putting religious statues everywhere. And the quote is, why will you do that? Because I have a devil on my back. Right. Was his response. Now, many took that to be that he was talking about his troubled son, Ronald Jr., or Butch as he was known. Like we say, surely, you would think about taking him to a psychiatrist or something like that, not bringing a religious figure like that, when Mr. Defeo was said to not be that religious prior to that. So these kind of things, they don't just come from nowhere. These these stories, you know, they don't just appear randomly.
Right.
But as you very rightly said, not many people know that.
Right. I mean,
not many.
Yeah, there's
about the priest.
Right. A lot of people don't know that. I originally did not know, and like I did with the disclosure, is I'm only going off the research because I try to research everything the best I can from all the information I can find. And one of the things is that 6 months before these murders occurred, he went and found an exorcist and got the statues, put one of the statues on that outside well. Am I correct?
That's right, yeah. Well, it was some kind of a plinth or a podium type thing, yeah. And yeah, there were religious statues all on that front garden at that time. Yeah, you know. And when you look at various old pictures of the house, you can tell very clearly that was when the Defeos lived there. That's when the Lutz lived there, because the statues are gone during the Lutz time. Okay. You know. The thing is, you know, with this concept of, you know, a priest being brought in, and again, this is purely one of my theories, we don't hear about that very often, and a lot of people will talk about this subject and not mention it. I do wonder, is it because they deliberately don't mention it, right, in the way of, actually, what we're here to debunk it, not support it. Right. You know, so they're conveniently left out. Because there are a few other points like that while we'll get into throughout this interview, that, you know, always seem to get left out when someone is trying to tell this story. Right, like, you know,
take for instance Mr. Anson, who wrote the book. He never put any of that stuff in there.
No, he didn't.
And we'll get into that later about Mr. Anson. That's fine.
Sure.
All right, let's get to this part. And we're, just so our audience knows, we're breaking this up into 3 chapters, chapters 1, 2, and 3. We're starting with the Defeos, going to the Lutz, and then we are going to go to the Warrens' investigation. So this brings us to the second question, Paul. Ronnie Defeo stated on the day of the murders he took some drugs and fell asleep in the basement and woke up to a hooded person or girl with black hands handing him a rifle, which he used to kill his family. Can you elaborate on this, Paul, and bring in the part where an investigator saw on the night of the murders a hooded person going to a dock or to the point, driving to the point, and putting the rifle in the water, and the identity is believed to be Dawn Defeo?
Precisely, yes. You know, I mean, many people, you know, are now of the belief that that hooded figure was his sister Dawn. You know, and you know, some people, you know, are very kind of confused as to whether she had any involvement in these murders, you know, or at least the planning of the murders anyway. You know, but this is one of those things, really, you know, that it's very, very hard to ever verify, because we're talking about a man who is still alive, still you know, serving 6 life sentences for 6 murders, who changes his story all the time, you know, and we can never really, you know, kind of rely on anything that he says, you know. So we could be talking, yeah, there could well have been a hooded black figure that was his sister.
Right, and let's let the audience know is that he was a drug addict. He took LSD, heroin, as I'm researching,
yes,
and probably alcohol, of course. And
yes,
he passes out. He heard voices in the basement collaborating against him, saying that they were going to kill him, and he believed it was his family. Then he saw the hooded figure.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the weird questions is, why was there an investigator already at the home the day of the murders when it was going to happen? What was going on with this family?
This is just one of many, many things that, you know, gets very confused, you know, kind of throughout the whole thing. You know, I mean, this, you know, this story has been retold so many times,
mm-hmm,
and there are so many different versions that we get.
Right.
You know, I mean, I would even question whether this investigator was actually there.
So you go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, I would even question, you know, whether this is someone adding their own slant to it, you know, because, you know, it does seem that, you know, everyone wanted a piece of this pie,
right,
you know, and to be involved somehow, you know, and Yeah, you're absolutely right about, this is where, it comes to, the what he did. Does it really come down to a demonic influence, or does it come down to him being a drug addict, a drinker, hanging around with the wrong crowds, and clearly actually being a very unsavory character his whole life.
Right, and like we talked about, negativity. Okay, now you're, like I said, you're now bringing in drugs and alcohol, which is totally opening up a doorway. The way I explain it is, you're opening up a crack in a door, and slowly in your life you just open up with a crack, and the more you indulge into the things that you have through the influences, that door continues to open up wider and wider, which is now going to let in something very, very large and powerful. I've actually heard these stories before. I've actually come across cases like this. It's a very interesting thing, and when you're taking LSD, you're opening up certain things in your mind that you do not usually see or hear. You're going to hear voices. So are we opening up something in our brain that's not supposed to be open, where we're opening up a doorway that we're opening, and we have negative influences coming in?
Well, that is a high possibility. It is, because that this is something else that's going to be discussed later as well, but not with drugs or drinks or anything like that, but meditation clears the mind and opens us up to spirits. Sure. And really about having that clear mind and being more vulnerable or open to these things. That's what it's all about. So someone who's high on drugs and possibly, been drinking alcohol as well, they would be more susceptible to it. Of course they would.
Yes.
But it has to be said that, where this comes from is a place of people trying to always say that was the whole thing, because he was a druggie and, a drinker and a generally unsavory kind of character, that explains the haunting. There was no haunting because he was just a messed up person.
Right.
But it really explain that away. It doesn't completely debunk the idea of there being a haunting. Not really. Right.
All right, let's move on to the next question. One very odd part, and I find this so weird, and once again, when you were talking about maybe there was an investigator, maybe there wasn't an investigator, so this brings me to my next question. One very odd part to the Defeo family, there were 9 times that rifle was fired at around 3:15 in the morning. Nobody heard it, but they heard at around 3:30 a dog barking. Can you help me with that at all?
Right. Okay.
I mean, don't you find that odd?
It's incredibly odd. It's incredibly odd, and I do feel that it's part of the mystery that I don't feel we'll ever solve that in our lifetime. Because it is so widely believed that no one heard a thing. Now some people I've come across have tried to explain this away by it being near the water, and so the sound carried in a different direction. I don't know how plausible that is, to be honest with you.
You know what? Neither do I. I'm not going to lie to you about that. I've been to ranges and I've fired weapons, but not to a range where there's water. So I wouldn't be able to.
It's very hard to say. Others have said that, while Butch was asleep in the basement, he was playing a war film very loudly on the television. And some will say maybe they did hear gunshots, but they presumed it was just him watching a television program very loudly. Mm-hmm. That's another thing that, kind of tries to, should you say, it's like someone's trying to myth bust almost, But it really comes down to it that, the common belief is that no one heard these gunshots.
Yeah, it's just one of those very odd things that you just go, all right, that's really weird. But once again, could it be a made-up story, just like possibly the investigator story is a made-up story, because nobody really ever elaborated why there was an investigator, at least on the research I've done. I mean, if you're on your Facebook page, if somebody knows the answer to that, please, by all means, give that out. I have no idea, because nobody's ever, and correct me if I'm wrong, I have not found any evidence on that.
No. This is just there are so many things that will go around, but then you dig into it, and really look at it more clearly. You can very often find that it was not what someone said, shall we say. It was a completely different finding that you end up with.
Okay.
That has been embellished or fabricated altogether.
Right.
Now, but talking of the gunshots, it was in the forum, the Facebook forum, which you're obviously part of, Neil, yeah?
Yes.
Now, it wasn't too long ago that there was a guy in there making comments about everything being a hoax, and this guy, when questioned, he said, well, I can prove it. So I said, well, please do then. His answer was along the lines of, well, people made movies and exaggerated everything, and I lived over the road at the time, and I knew the neighbours, and the neighbours did hear the gunshots. Now, this guy kind of disappeared after that, because you're like, well, if the neighbours heard the gunshots, you're talking the neighbours who hated the public attention. Would they not have stepped up sooner and debunked that as an urban myth?
Right. I mean, because like we talked about yesterday when you and I were talking, just talking, we actually brought up the subject of how these neighbors, why wouldn't they want to debunk everything? Because it becomes like a carnival around their houses. Yes. All these people who come there, and I'm not knocking them. Everybody wants to see the Amityville house, but at the same time, you have to respect that people live in that community. And,
that's right.
And you have to respect that.
Yes.
So, of course, if I lived right next to the Amityville house, which God knows I wouldn't, but if I did, I don't want to see a long line when I'm trying to go to the grocery store, man, or go and try to pick up a kid. That would be nuts.
If I was rich enough, I'd buy it and live in it. And if I saw people outside, I'd invite them in for a cup of tea.
Hell yeah, man. I'm going to tell you something. If you bought the Amityville house, we should actually go in on this thing. And we buy it, man, you would make a ton of cash off that, man, doing ghost tours through that all day long. I'm just saying, man. Because I'm in the business of it. But I don't want to get off track. All right, so let's go on to the next question. The very odd account is the bodies. They were all laying face down. And the thing is that the autopsy shows that there was no drugs in the system. The bodies were exactly, the autopsy report says that the bodies were never moved. Whereas some people, once again, you're going to get your people who are going to speculate. They say, no, there were drugs. There was a secondary autopsy. There was this, there was that. But am I right or wrong that the bodies were never moved, which is very odd? How are they all laying on their stomach?
Well, this is it, I mean, that is, it is another very strange part of the whole thing. I mean, again, you're talking, people in their own home with a loud gun being fired, and not moving, not even being woke up, so it seems, But there are theories around that, maybe, each one he walked into, because it was said to have happened very quickly. We could be talking, he walks in, points the gun, line your front now, bang. That is one theory, but as regards to them being moved, these secondary autopsies, well, perhaps one of them was running around and trying to escape, I feel that is really, that's people trying to be clever and rewrite history.
And you know what? Go ahead, I'm sorry. Pardon me.
No, that's okay, please. I did finish, actually, yeah.
Is that, one of the things that I've known throughout time is through hauntings is a lot of these stories, they do begin with an ounce of truth. And that's a fact. Or they would never be brought to the light that they're at. Some way or another, there is some reason and rhyme that something did happen. But throughout time, everything gets embellished. And people build upon stories, as in, like, take for instance here in the Chicagoland area, I don't know if you ever heard the Resurrection Mary story. It's in America, in the Chicagoland area, about a girl who hitchhikes throughout a place called Archer Avenue. it's an embellished story throughout time, but people enjoy it. And someone like a Mr. J.
I think I've heard of this one. Yes,
Right.
I think I've heard of it.
And
Yes.
like a Mr. J. Anson, the author of Amityville, he embellished. That's my opinion. Once again, I'm just putting that out there. He embellished on it, but I understand. He's trying to make money. He's trying to entertain. That's what his job was.
Exactly.
You know,
This is it. And this is what people fail to realise. You know, when we're kind of, we're picking out fact from fiction.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, well, how many true stories have ever been delivered in a book and certainly made into a film?
Right.
That's been exactly to the story.
Right. And like in defense of Mr. Anson, if all of a sudden he came up with a movie that just showed a guy down in the basement doing some LSD, and someone hands him a shotgun, and he just shoots his family, and nothing's ever really done, would you go see that movie? Or would you want to see a movie that has that Hollywood theme to it? Of course you would. That's why it's called entertainment.
That's why it's entertaining, and it's as though, some people, they don't want it to be entertaining, they want to spoil it,
Right.
because, the murders themselves, it's as though they want to make it out to be, it wasn't as bad as you thought. Oh, no, it was far more explainable than this, that, and the other. But I will always say this, 6 people murdered in their own home, in their own beds. That is a true life horror story.
It is.
Its own.
Yes.
So what are people trying to prove when they keep looking for new evidence around it? It's a horror story, and it's an undeniably real one. End of. Period.
Yeah. So that brings me into this. Now, before I say I believe or not believe Ron Defeo Jr.'s story on an outside influence, a demon, if you will, let's break this down for our audience from a paranormal or supernatural point of view. You have a father, Ron Defeo Jr., who is physically and mentally abusive towards his family. Number one. We can agree on that?
It's allegedly so, but I do have other theories around that. But yes, please carry on. Yeah.
Okay. Then we also have substance abuse by a family. Number 2.
Yes.
We definitely know that Junior, Butch, was definitely doing drugs and substance abuse. So we can agree upon that does open up a veil of evil to come in. Yes?
Yes.
All right. Third, now you have negative reactions to negative actions. So things are unseen, as you will, such as conducting or plotting a murder of your family. Can all this be happening after a prolonged amount of time to break someone down mentally and have he or she cause tragic actions? Yes, I believe that. Do you believe that?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
But I have to... Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please carry on. Yeah, please carry on.
But I am not completely sold on this. Was primarily a reaction to demons or something supernatural. What do you think, Paul?
That's pretty much how I see it, and how most, shall we say, the more intelligent views these days are. This wasn't a perfectly nice, normal person who suddenly changed into a monster and did what he did. This is something that was building up over a long time. And he was never a particularly pleasant person to begin with. But it's like we say, that there's other factors that people tend not to consider, which would be along the lines of, maybe there was supernatural influence around the situation, even if it didn't cause the murders, and it's very interesting as well that you say, about Mr. Defeo being this kind of, shall we say, many people would describe him as this unmerciful tyrant, who he beat his wife, he beat all his kids, as though he did it all the time for the sake of it, but let's look at it another way. As in, for a start, he's got his eldest son who is always in trouble in some way or another. That would drive you crazy.
Sure.
It is said that Dawn, who was 18, so close to being an adult herself, was no angel. you know, she was a rebel herself, you know. And then we've got Mrs. Defeo, Louise, who is said to have had affairs, you know. And so, although nothing justifies this man raising his hand to these people close to him, you know, we've got to kind of understand, you know, where did this anger come from? You know, that, you know, it wasn't really a case of him, you know, them being perfect angels and he was the dictator. You know, there's a lot of angles to look at there.
Oh yeah, I agree. I agree with you. And like we said, it starts out, you know, something small, and then influences just seem to begin with that. You know, let's talk about Dawn Defeo for a second. There is a belief out there that actually Dawn Defeo committed the murders, and actually Ron was more Butch, if you will, was more of an accomplice, but he was very angry because he was actually very close to his father. Now, one of the things I've known from a psychological point of view is that a lot of people who get beaten or always abused physically or mentally for some reason, they always still have loyalty to the one individual who's doing it to them. It's weird to me, of course, and weird to a lot of people, but through the anger he had, because he found, you know, he knows his dad's dead, but for some reason he still had a connection to him. Could Dawn Defeo have actually done the murders, and through the anger, Butch killed her at the end?
That there's a lot of people who, you know, talk about that and kind of believe that, you know, that's how it happened, you know. And you know, I mean, of course, it is a possibility, you know, without being privy to that event, you know, we could never really know, you know. But I would say that, you know, really looking at it, and when we really look into, you know, the details around it, it is far more likely that Butch killed them all. It really is. Okay. Because, you know, I mean, he, like we say, he changed his story so many times, you know, and to claim that his sister killed them all and then he killed her in self-defense, you know, that is one of many very different versions that he told, you know. And it's something that I would say more than anything, it's captured people's imagination. And right. People really.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that we have to present to our audience, is all these different scenarios out there that possibly Dawn Defeo possibly killed the family, but Ron Defeo killed her in the end. Because it also, I wonder if the same person who brought up this story brought up the story about the investigator, you know, and tried to get them to be to collaborate with each other, that story, you know?
Yeah, precisely. You know, I mean, the thing is, I mean, I'm not going to mention any names here, you know, but I'm going to say that there are two people notable for putting out books and documentaries, you know, really digging into the murder, you know, trying to gain notoriety for changing history. And it's turned out that, you know, really a lot of what they're talking about was, should we say, inaccurate. Okay. You know, or, you know, kind of not really substantial, you know, to the point of, you know, that there was a seventh body, which there wasn't, you know. And what was the other one? You know, something to do with, you know, Butch having a wife, Geraldine, you know, and there seems to have been a lot of lies around that as well.
Right.
That have come out.
And that's something I never even heard of. I never even through research that there was a seventh. Who would be the seventh victim?
It turned out, you know, well, so shall I say, according to common belief,
there
was a body, but it wasn't in that house. In fact, it was some distance away, and it was a totally different, you know, kind of, it was a different case altogether. Really? It was nothing to do with the Defeo family or their house or anything like that.
It's just coincidence.
You know, someone just muddled it all together, really.
I appreciate you. See, and that's why I got guys like you coming on these shows, you know, to help me learn a little bit more. I have to be honest with you. I always appreciate stuff like that.
I call myself a learner too, because I'm always learning.
Yeah.
You know, we don't stop learning on this. There's always something new.
Yeah.
You know, and I describe really we'll call it, well, we describe Amityville as, it's a mountain of confusion with, you know, the truth buried somewhere underneath it, you know, and people like us, you know, we enjoy wading through that mountain, you know, kind of say, well, yeah, that's plausible, yeah, that sounds like nonsense, yes, I believe this happened, no, I don't believe that happened, that's hearsay, that's someone's opinion, you know? But that's kind of the enjoyment of sifting through it all.
Yeah, it is, you know, it is, and I enjoyed everything that all the research I've been doing. Now this brings me to my next thing, and we're going to end this chapter 1, and I hope I'm ending it well for your audience, because I try to put in the best work I can for everybody. All right, my belief is the Defeo family tragedy began with the haunting in the home due to the tragic and dramatic murders caused in the home. There was a lot of negativity prior to the murders that was influencing this home. And the family was feeding off them. And the nail in the coffin was tragedy, these murders. You have a family killed in the middle of the night. These souls may not have known that they are deceased and may still not know they are. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, sorry, when you started that then, you know, you said the previous murders.
Right.
Were you referring to Defeo or the Lutz family?
Yeah, the Defeo murders. Basically, what I'm saying is, I believe that the haunting actually started with the Defeo family. I think that boosted it into the Lutz home, but it's because of there might be lingering spirits now that are lost inside the home through a tragedy or a dramatic thing that happens in any kind of timeline. It could be like a residual haunting, whereas they are still there. Like, take for instance that picture of that boy, and we're going to get into that a little bit when we get into the Warren part, chapter 3. Is that, do you believe that these are lingering spirits possibly that are lost inside this home now?
I would certainly say that, yeah, I agree with where you're coming from here. You know, there was something there to begin with, yeah. And that the murders would have exacerbated it. You know, because... But yeah, that is going to be, you know, as it's been described as a perfect psychic storm.
Exactly.
You know, that it would hit anyone like a ton of bricks, as we would say in England.
That's good.
And so, yeah, I do believe that it triggered something. You know, and let's look at it another way as well. Here's another slant: is that, you know, if we were talking, you know, 6 restless spirits left in that home. You know, there was a year that passed by of that house standing empty, you know, and during that time, you know, you could be talking 6 restless spirits who've got no idea what's happened.
Exactly.
You know, that, you know, oh, it's still our home. Mm-hmm. You know, there's no one else here. Mm-hmm. You know, then a year later, a new family comes in, and it's like, what the hell are you doing in our house?
Exactly.
You know, so,
it's been my experience. It's been my experience that they believe that there's an umbilical cord to the soul, okay, if you believe in stuff like that, which I do, and through traumatic or dramatic physical occurrences, either through a car crash or like this, you're sound asleep and all of a sudden everybody is shot in the home. The soul is still going to wake up, and then an ethereal umbilical cord will break from the physical body, and you do not know where you are. Could they be lost? That's basically my point to all that. And could they be causing, there's still negativity inside that house, confusing these souls, and they are still lost, such as that picture of the young man when the Warrens were investigating, and I'm going to make sure that we definitely get into that, because that's so amazing picture. But this is going to take us into chapter 2, and we are going to do a commercial break. A little message from Graveside Paranormal.
Oh, hello. This is Neal at Graveside Paranormal. Every first Sunday and third Sunday of the month, you can check out our show Spirits by the Graveside. Either it's on YouTube, Spotify, or Anchor FM. You can also just check out our YouTube site, which is Graveside Paranormal, and also check out our website, www.gravesideparanormal.com. Or you can send an email to Neal at gravesideparanormal.com or Steve at gravesideparanormal.com. If you have any paranormal things happening in your home or your business, feel free to call us, because what do? We investigate those things. Call us at 708-227-7747. Once again, tune in every first Sunday of the month and third Sunday of the month for Spirits by the Graveside. And boo.
Alright, this brings us to the Lutz family, Chapter 2. Only a year after, almost to the month of the Defeo murders, the Lutz family only lived in the house for 28 days. Paul, please tell us about the first day in the Lutz family home, please.
Well, it was said, and we're talking, kind of direct interviews here from Mr. Lutz himself, that with the first day, they found the dog trying to, what looked like trying to hang himself, having tried to jump the fence, and obviously his leash wasn't long enough, and there he was. Obviously the dog was rescued, and we could put that down to a coincidence. Maybe he was just, thinking, oh, I can jump over there and it's fine.
I have to, from my point of view, I have to kind of debunk that a little bit, because I have a dog who does crazy things like that. He'll jump over the fence, and my neighbor goes, hey, your dog's hanging himself. I go, it's because he doesn't like me.
Yeah.
So that could be just actually something that can be explained.
Something that the dog did, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty that view myself, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you.
The one thing that they always seem to start the story with, that what happened on the same day was that a priest who was a personal friend of George Lutz came by to bless the house, and this was on the advice of someone else who'd said, if you're moving into a house where there's been murders, you should really get blessed.
Yes.
So that's why they went ahead with this plan. Now, it was quite famously known by now that, that the priest was in a certain room on the middle floor, the second floor, whatever we're calling that.
I think it was the sewing room. The sewing room?
It's what became the sewing room, yes, the notorious sewing room, yeah. And he was told to get out by a disembodied voice, and also felt a slap to his face. Now, this was, as you rightly say, was the sewing room, because his advice to the family was to not use that as a bedroom, because he felt something not right in there. And so hence it became, not somewhere that someone slept.
Right.
And it kind of went from there that, he did continue to bless the rest of the house and had given them, the advice not to use that room, but he apparently did not tell them what had happened in that room exactly, Then, following this, we're talking, gradual and subtle things that started to happen, really. That we wouldn't necessarily, instantly put down to a haunting. We're talking that George Lutz let his personal hygiene go down. And
you know what? We're going to get into that. We're going to get into that in just a second. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, that sewing room. Kathy Lutz, right off the bat, stated to George that she was embraced by the presence of a woman and frightened by this. Do you know of any other times Kathy Lutz had a uneasy feeling in the home?
Apparently, this female presence was more than once, and that she could smell the perfume. And this is one of perhaps the closest things we could get to a description of, one of the Defeo family. As in, was this the previous matriarch of the house reaching out to the new matriarch? Of course, whatever the intention was, it would come across as scary.
Sure.
To someone, you're thinking that I can't see anyone in the room, so why the hell can I feel someone and smell them?
Right. I've had that happen where I'll be at a haunted place, and you can feel it. It's trying to enter into your shoulder, back of your neck area, and it's trying to make some kind of contact with you. I've had that happen, not countless, but I've had it happen a few times, where you feel this presence, and it tries to be overwhelming and tries to get inside you. So I have to say, hey, that is a very strong possibility that happens.
Yes.
The priest thing, I believe that's a very strong possibility, because we've come across things where it says get out, or you get a psychic approach where it says it in your head, get out. I've actually had somebody who said, get the F out.
Yes.
But you're not hearing it in your ears, but you're hearing it in your head. And I've actually had that happen. Another thing is that Kathy Lutz, correct me if I'm wrong, she would look in the mirror and she would see herself aging. Am I correct on that?
That apparently happened twice. To my knowledge anyway, twice. That, she saw the face of someone considerably older, or we could say a much older geriatric version of herself. That certainly wasn't a 30-year-old woman looking back at herself.
Right.
And this was said to have also happened as they were leaving, and it took some time for her face to return to normal.
Yeah, and I also found out that when she died some years ago, that a lot of people said, and I think it was from either it was lung or I think it was from some kind of cancer, and
it was emphysema.
What was it?
Yeah, it was a lung disease.
It was a lung disease. Okay, and the thing is that they said that she actually looked a lot older than what she was because of the deterioration in her body. Could she have been looking into the future? Could somehow this house predicting her death one day? Could it have happened? Maybe. Some people think that.
Yeah, I mean that is a possibility. Because I feel that I think it was about 2004 when she passed.
Okay.
The last interview she ever gave was for the History Channel, and she's sitting there with George, and she doesn't look like an old lady. She looks, quite frail, and kind of fragile even. She's got the oxygen specks in her nose. So she's obviously not in great health.
Right, and when I looked at old pictures of her when they first got married, she was a very attractive girl.
She was a pretty lady.
Very good skin, man, just very attractive lady. And then she sees the deterioration in the mirror and this and that. I'm sure psychologically it really messed her up.
Well, it would do, most definitely, And let's remember also, these reports that, maybe it was that premonition, of how she's going to look in time to come and whatnot. Let's remember that, she was still in her 50s when she passed.
Yeah.
She wasn't an old lady. She wasn't old. But she somehow looked older, but probably, largely down to her illness, of course.
Right.
But yeah, it is fair to say that she looked a lot older than she actually was.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do believe that there's something in that. Yeah, I really would say so.
It's a good possibility. Now let's bring in the George like you wanted to. George Lutz had many personal changes in 28 days. Can you elaborate on his personal changes, please?
It was along the lines that, like we say, his personal grooming, and washing, it just, went out the window. That, he wasn't taking pride in himself. And he was also, kind of losing interest in things. He was missing days at work. Although it was his business, he was the boss. He still wasn't, kind of going in there to keep his finger on the pulse. It was always kind of, another day will do. There's no need to bother today, sort of thing. He also was described as always being cold.
Right.
And constantly stoking the fire. If he wasn't stoking the fire, he was preparing more wood to put on the fire. Because he just always felt, too cold, basically. Yeah, and that seemed to have been something that was unique to him. That no one else really complained of feeling cold.
Right.
And so, yeah, it seemed to affect his personality in that way, and also in the way that he gets short-tempered, you know, with his wife and with the kids, you know, for no particular reason.
Kind of like, just like the possibility of Ronald Defeo Sr. Maybe he entered into the home, you know, in a good, positive, you know, format, and with his family, and then throughout some little bit of time, things started deteriorating in him. It's,
you know what? It's another possibility.
You know, could the spirit of Ronald Defeo Sr. be still lingering? Because we talked about that ethereal umbilical cord. Could he been influencing his emotional, spiritual self, influencing the new man of the house?
Could well be.
You know?
Could well. You know, that is a strong possibility.
You know, it's some of the things that, you know, as a paranormal investigator, you start to think about. You know, it sounds a little out there, but that's what I deal with. I deal with a little out there. So, but I really do believe that some of the lingering spirits, they are sitting out there, and they will influence the person. There is a good chance we go right back to Kathy Defeo, like you said. Could the old the lady who died in the house now try to embrace this lady here? Could that be what she's saying? Like, she's finding some kind of connection.
This is highly possible.
Yeah,
it's possible. You know, it's something that would make sense.
Right.
You know. I mean, if we were going to, you know, kind of look at everything from a logical perspective and, you know, kind of rationalize everything, there'd be no point to this conversation at all, of course.
of course. Yeah. Of course. So let's bring in... Go ahead.
Yeah. No, please do, yeah.
All right, so let's bring in the Lutz daughter, Missy. She had an unseen friend in the home by the name of Jody, okay? Now, let's let the audience understand something. That the next door neighbors had a Siamese cat. Am I correct? It was a Siamese cat?
Something of that nature.
And yes, Ronnie Jr. Butch used to call it the pig.
That's right, yeah.
And in the movie, from Mr. Anson's movie to book to the movie, talk about that the family sees these red eyes in the window. And she would actually call it Jody the pig, or Jody, which was actually weird, because isn't that the same name that they were using, the Defeos were using? No, it was not. But it was something about the pig. That they called it a pig, and the Lutzes called it a pig. Am I correct on this?
The story originated, you know, from Missy describing this imaginary friend called Joe.
Right.
You know, which was initially, you know, just thought of as an imaginary friend.
Right.
You know, which you know, kind of, you know, they put it down to that.
Okay, and what I was getting to, though, is the two red eyes that were in the window, though.
Yes. It was believed, you know, a lot of people believe that it was a cat, and it was the pig that you're describing there.
Right.
However, let's look at it another way. That those, you know, kind of eyes, you know, were from something outside of a bedroom window, where, you know, it wouldn't really have been possible for a cat to climb up there.
Right.
You know, if we look at pictures of the house, there was no drain pipe, no tree, or anything to have got to that particular window. You know, for a cat to be there long enough to be noticed.
Okay.
And although they do say that this particular breed of cat could look as though it had red eyes, but it still doesn't explain, you know, kind of how would a cat get up to the middle floor when there's nothing to climb up. You know, so it's a weird one.
So it's
where many. Go on, sorry, yeah.
It's still just open to more speculation by many people. So you would say that part.
It is, you know, and you know, people will always, you know, have their skeptical views. It's one of those things where it always comes across as people will say the eyes in the window were Jody, and Jody was just a cat, so there was no Jody. Well, it's not as quite straightforward as that, because the eyes in the window were not necessarily connected to Mrs. Imaginary Friend. Not necessarily.
And the other thing is that Missy said from that photo from the Warrens that, like I said, we're going to get to it, but it's just something that has to be talked about throughout this whole 3 chapters. She says that was the boy inside the house. Am I right on that? That she said that to her parents when she saw that picture of that boy?
Something along those lines, yes.
Yeah.
Something along those lines. That was the boy that she'd seen in the house, or the boy that had been described to her by Jodie. You know, there are a few different versions of that, actually. But yes, it was said that she recognised the face. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the next one. At the last day, on the 28th day, I cannot find anything that is giving the reason and the rhyme why they left on that 28th day. Is there something hidden? Is there something I'm not researching enough that you can bring light to me of what actually happened on that 28th day that made that whole family? They had a fridge full of food, and if you look back at some of the old videos, the fridge was full of food. Like they were going to be there for quite a while.
Yeah.
Do you know what happened?
My answer is yes and no, because not many people know at all. You know, arguably no one knows. Because George Lutz really struggled to talk about that, and it was described as something too difficult or painful to actually, you know, describe in great detail, other than he knew it was time to go. You know, and also, you know, which would be, you know, kind of contrary to popular belief, is that they didn't actually just run out the house screaming, you know, and run away in terror. It was more along the lines of a conversation on the phone with the priest, advising them to take some time out, which is hence why they left with minimum provisions of, you know, just a few changes of clothes, not with the intention of never coming back, but it was a case of we're at our wits' end. We need to be free of this house, temporarily at least. And that's when they kind of drove off and stayed with Kathy's mother. But the actual events of that last day, you know, that is a mystery, to many people.
That maybe it was it was probably just a slow progression of all the events that just evolved just on the 28th day, and they were said, we're fed up with it. Maybe it wasn't something that totally crazy happened on that 28th day. It was just a slow progression that they were just like, I'm done.
Exactly. I mean, we could be talking something that was purely psychological, that was just too much. Can't do this anymore. You know, let's call the priest. The priest advises, if it's getting you down that much, you need to get out.
Right.
You know, at least in the short term.
Yeah.
And so that's what they did.
All right.
But it wasn't, initially, it wasn't with the intention of not going back.
Yeah.
You know, it ended up being that they didn't go back. You know, but the kind of dramatized version that the book gave us, and certainly what the movie gave us, were exactly that.
Right.
You know, they were dramatized versions.
But that works, doesn't it, for the purpose of dramatic
It does, yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does, because how are you going to sell stuff? It's just a fact.
You know, that final act in that film needs to see them running away in terror, doesn't it?
Yes.
Because, you know, in real life, if you're under pressure, the final straw, the decider, the thing that makes you go, can be a very seemingly unimportant thing. You know, if your nerves are frayed, what will be the trigger might not be the biggest thing. You know, so but that doesn't make a good film, and it doesn't make a good novel.
That's right.
Yeah, like everybody's got their own fight or flight. They have their own. Everybody has their own thing. You know, what if some individual could be pushed to. A quick question between the both of you. The both movies, the one with Ryan Reynolds and the first one I think was 74, 78 was made. What is your best one? Because I do not like the Ryan Reynolds movie whatsoever. I do not like it.
You know what? Not many people do. It's really, you know, I mean, even, you know, people who don't necessarily believe the story ever happened are not great fans of that film. because it doesn't even stick to the original story
Yeah.
of any kind, really. So as regards to an accurate film version, we've got to be talking the one with James Brolin. That would be
James Brolin. Thank you.
It's far from a documentary, but it's more faithful to the original story that was made famous.
Sure.
So that's what we're up against, really.
Yeah.
And then there are so many things in that are questionable. That some people will say, "Oh well, did blood really drip from the walls?" Well, no, it didn't. Again, that was for the film to make it more dramatic.
I think also as well that version, it's made very close to the time when these events happened. So by very fact that it is a film from the 70s, it has that look, that feel, that authenticity of the era that it's very difficult to replicate by making a subsequent film. Even if you can be meticulous to the look and the architecture and the style of an era, but it's not going to quite capture. The recent past is the most difficult to capture, really, isn't it?
Yes.
So that look, I think, it gives it that element. Personally, for me, and the story of my marriage with Paul has been slowly integrated into being able to watch horror movies, because I'm the epitome of the scaredy cat, or certainly was. For me, it was the second one, the Amityville 2, The Possession, that absolutely terrified me.
It's still terrifying.
Do you think it's because of just the extra added drama to it? Like the little kid, he's about to brush his teeth, and all of a sudden there's this crazy looking old lady, and she's just like, nom, 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 nom.
I think they were very conscious of upping the ante with the first one. I mean, it's quite slight in terms of there are the flashes of the eyes of the window. There's not. It's quite subtle, and I think the same thing doesn't work twice. It's like when. The reveal of the shark in Jaws 2, there's no point waiting to see the shark until halfway through the movie, because you've already seen it.
Yeah, you already saw it in one. I get you. Now, you know what? Take, for instance, I'm sorry, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that was all I was going to say. Really.
Oh, so let's take, for instance, the before we get into the Warrens, because I'm building up to the Warrens, Chapter 3, the Warrens. Take, for instance, the movie Conjuring 2, okay?
Yes.
And it takes us in the beginning with the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine, at the Amityville house.
That's right.
You guys seen the Conjuring 2. Kid, have you ever seen Conjuring 2?
Yes, I really like that film.
Man, those movies are awesome, man.
A long time, that is.
Yeah, I mean, the Enfield haunting is a very intriguing story. I think it's kind of like the British version of the Amityville, really.
It is really,
So it made a lot of sense that that was what dominated that film in terms of the focus. But that little nod to the ghostly figure in the doorway, I think was a nice touch, the way they built that at the beginning of that film, the references to Amityville. Yes.
Now, if they would have added something like that, into the movie, the original one as well as the second one, man, they would have had money there, because that was so well done.
It was.
Yep.
It was.
Man, that was so well done. All right, so that brings me into Chapter 3. Enter in the Warrens. Enter in the investigation with the Warrens. Laura Dididio, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, a reporter at the time, brought in Ed and Lorraine Warren and a group of parapsychologists and a psychic.
Yes.
Can you tell us about this day in 1976?
That they were all there, yes.
Yes.
Laura can tell this story much better than I can, but yes, because she was there.
Right. So Ed, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
So Ed and Lorraine Warren discovered that Ronald Defeo Sr. went and got an exorcist, like we talked about, and brought many religious items 6 months before the murders. This is when you really bring in investigators in, and you're bringing them in, and they're finding out information that nobody else has. So let's go over this. First, like we talked in the beginning, before we even get into the paranormal part of it, is that Mr. Defeo Sr. brought in an exorcist 6 months prior to the movies, For whatever reason, but why does somebody? Because something evil is going on. Something that ain't right is going on. And he's noticed it. It takes a lot for somebody when they start to become possessed to actually notice something's wrong in their house. He did actually a good thing by doing that when you notice things like that. Second thing, some people don't know. Let's talk about the red room. The red room is actually just like a cubby hole. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
See, everybody thinks it's this red room is, for some reason, it just doesn't change color. It's because it's painted.
It's painted red.
It's painted red, man. But
over now. I mean, it is just a cubby hole that, like you say, was painted red. Jay Anson made more of it.
Yeah.
By suggesting that there's some kind of dry well in there, some kind of pathway to hell.
Yeah, you know, like one of the movies, they have this well in the basement. There was no well in the basement.
No. And the room would have been barely big enough for one person to fit in it. Mm-hmm. You know, we're looking at, you know, something quite small, really. Right.
But the one thing that the Warrens did find, and a lot of people don't know either, I might have the answer why Mr. Defeo Sr. went to go find an exorcist. Ronnie Jr. Butch was into witchcraft.
That has been said.
They say that the Warrens actually found a book of witchcraft inside the home. Near the cubby hole. I believe it's in the basement. Maybe it is a cubby hole. I'm not completely sure it's a cubby hole. But they said they did find it in the basement. A book of witchcraft and other witchcraft items. Now, understand, and I put out this disclosure once again. This is only by the research that I have found. If other people can tell me, no, Neal, you're incorrect, this is what's true. But that's where we talk about that one person tells one side, one other person tells another side, and that's when we get the confusion.
That is certainly what came from Mr. and Mrs. Warren.
Yes.
That they discovered that, and they believed that, shall we say, his tools were stored in that little room.
Right. He had tools, and part of those tools, what I'm doing from my research, is that he had witchcraft books. Could Mr. Defeo Sr., this is all hypothetical, figured out what was truly going on in this home? Noticed it inside of himself, and that he knew he was doing wrong? So he went and got himself an exorcist to try to put everything right. Maybe it's a possibility.
It is a high possibility. Mm-hmm. It's a high possibility. One that, should we say, only people like ourselves would consider.
Right.
Because there's people out there who would say that's probably nonsense that didn't happen. But yes, I would agree with that. Mm-hmm. That, you know, it's coming down to something that, you know, you wouldn't do things like this on a normal day, would you? You wouldn't think, wow, I've got problems, I'm going to go and get a priest.
Yeah, and he went to I think he went to a different country, and I truly forget, and I apologize for that, but he went far to go get this exorcist.
It was another state, so I believe. I just can't remember which one it was.
Right. But he did go out of his way to go do that. And like I said, they also did find the witchcraft book. So maybe something was going on. Once again, Ryan Defeo Jr. Butch, LSD, drugs, playing with witchcraft. It's kind of like a nice recipe for, hey, I'm bringing on Lucifer. You know?
This is it.
Yes. You never know. I actually had a kid, and this kind of goes with this, a couple years ago, where he was making his homemade Ouija board. And he made it out of paper, and he caused something inside the house. Just so everybody knows, it's not the board that's doing it. It's the intent of the individual. If all of a sudden Ron Defeo Jr. Butch has intent to make a deal with the devil, he's going to make it. And it is
not the tool. The tool just helps.
It's just a tool, just like a hammer. A hammer only puts up a wall, right?
Yeah.
It takes the intent of the individual to go ahead and build that wall.
Yes.
So let's go on to the next one. I'm sorry if I got too deep.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah. So Ed and Lorraine Warren, from their investigation, showed two pictures. One of which is the picture of the boy peering near the stairs. That looks like John Matthew Defeo. Am I correct on that, Matthew?
Yes.
Now, this is really weird. I'm going to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this picture, when it's compared to John Matthew Defeo, man, I checked the eyebrows, I checked the nose line. It looks just like him. Some people say it was actually the cameraman who did that. I don't know. That head was kind of small compared from an adult to a child.
Yeah.
And that's like we said, Missy believed that she saw that little boy inside the house. Am I correct on that, Paul?
Yes. And the doorway in which he appears was missing room. Yeah, that we just kind of have to do our little bit of geography of the house to work that out. But yes, that was Missy's room. There are indeed a lot of people who are trying to debunk this, to say that it was a crew member, indeed a cameraman, who happened to be in that spot at that time.
And then the interesting thing is the eyes. Okay, so let's understand something. The pictures were done in infrared. It was not a flash.
Yes.
So why are there white glowing eyes?
Some would argue that it was his spectacles.
It was his spectacles. Huh.
Some would argue that that's what it was.
Well, then, wouldn't there be pictures out there, because it was on a timer of him setting it up after the fact of setting it up, it should have went off. So then there should be pictures of him with that. That's the only way you can debunk that. That's the only way you can debunk that for me.
Yes, precisely. Because you'd see him going in, you'd see him coming out, you'd see him crouching down, you'd see him standing up. There would be other pictures, you're right.
I'm just saying, correct me if I'm wrong. If you find out something better than me, fine, go for it. Because I always like being corrected, to be honest with you. If I'm wrong about something, I don't mind. But let's bring in the next picture. The picture of supposedly Padre Pio. And the next one, which was taken by Lorraine Warren's group, believes it's a picture of Padre Pio, an Italian priest who had stigmata. Just so our audience knows what stigmata is. Stigmata is from Christ being put on the cross, where he has the holes from the nails inside of his hands as well as his feet, and they constantly open up and bleed. Supposedly Padre Pio did have these things, and the moment that he died, they seemed to seal up. He is a saint now. On the day they were doing their investigation there, she holds the little statue of Padre Pio, and she was in a room. And in that room, they took a picture with their infrared cameras, and up near the moose head, it gives this face of Padre Pio. It's weird. Now, I understand pareidolia. Pareidolia is a thing where, people, they look in the clouds, and they believe they see Mickey Mouse, but the other person next to them doesn't see Mickey Mouse. It's what the person is thinking of what they're looking at. Could have been pareidolia? I don't know. It's just very odd how she's holding that figure. And there's two pictures. There's the one that's moved. There's the one that's moved really close up, which you cannot see because it's darkened. But there's the one that was in the video with the Warrens, that was presented in their video. That is actually the really good picture.
Yes, and it's very hard to find that picture.
It
as
is.
We were discussing, because I have looked for it since we last spoke. I cannot find it. At least I can't find a version that we can zoom into.
Right, it's too dark. It's too dark. See,
I feel that I'd say the only way we can look at it is by reviewing the videos in which it's featured.
Yeah, just so our audience knows, go to the Warrens investigation on their they used to have in the 90s of chapter 2 of it. They're with their son-in-law, and it's about maybe 10-15 minutes into it, and they have a picture on there, and they're going to go through it with you. It's a very interesting thing. Now, the other face that's on this moose head, come on, man, it's a G.I. Joe head.
Yes.
That's a G.I. Joe head. I mean, everybody who lived in the 60s and 70s knows that's G.I. Joe, man. Before everybody starts believing, oh my God, that's Ronnie DeFeo Jr., man. No, that's a G.I. Joe head.
Yes, it is. It is, yeah. And I fell for that myself.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
I mean, it's ironic, yeah, but that's a G.I. Joe head, man.
Yeah, it is.
So,
most definitely.
Yeah, so I had to point out some things. Sorry.
Well, but this is the thing, with the whole thing, because we really, to look at the truth in a story like this, we have to take away the nonsense. We have to take away the movie and the books and the numerous different versions that have gone round and look at the basis of it, really.
Yeah.
And there are things that, we need to say, yeah, that didn't really happen. That couldn't have really happened, to get a more realistic view of it. But what we're left with is still a lot of things that can't be proved or verified, and certainly not explained with logic.
Right. And the one thing is that I want to bring to our audience, because you and I talked about this the other day, the next show that we're going to do together, we're going to try to do like a breakdown of all these myths and the truth behind certain things. Because this is such a story that you could sit here for hours talking about. So we're just trying to point out as much as we can today. But I would love to get back together with Paul and talk more about it. But and I hope you agree with me on that, Paul.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I'm someone who can talk about this subject forever.
Right. And
but again, we may have both learned a hell of a lot more.
Yeah.
Because there's always been to learn.
Yep, there's always, and take for instance, a lot of people don't know is that George and Kathy Lutz actually took a polygraph test.
Yes.
And they passed it.
They both passed, and it was said to have been with like the top guy
in the FBI.
In the field.
Yes.
That. Some people, are still out to debunk that. That it was coincidence. Is it really verifiable? They both passed with flying colours, though. So what can you say?
Right.
They didn't lie.
No, they did not lie whatsoever. I mean, I totally agree with that. They did not lie whatsoever. Take, for instance, all right, let's say George Lutz is really good at lying. Let's just say he is. And he passes it. But how is it that his wife's able to pass it?
Precisely.
You know what I'm saying? So you have to look at that and go, something did happen. Of course, throughout time, drama does happen in some of these books and movies, of course. But that's what that brings across my conclusion, if I may, for a moment, Paul. My conclusion after researching and looking through the believers and non-believers, all people love a great story. And when you combine tragedy, supernatural, and real events, you have a winner. That's a fact. But when these people, either from writing books or movies, there is going to be extra drama, of course. That's their job. And I love a good book or a movie, but I believe the events from a true story has been manipulated to entertain us. I do believe something supernatural or paranormal did occur, but not to the degree of their creators. I believe the Defeo family tragedy was brought on by negative energy, which does cause outside forces to influence people. That's a fact. I believe from these murders caused by the veil of evil to open wider for the Lutz family who moved in and stayed for only 28 days. In the end, it is up to you, the listener, to decide. I hope we brought enough evidence to you, and I hope you conclude for yourself what possibly happened. And please go to Paul's website. Paul, if you could, I'm going to give you a second here, and I'm going to thank you for coming on, and Kit for coming on today. I want you.
Thank you.
Oh, dude, I love talking about this stuff. Kit, thank you very much. And I just ordered your book, and I actually got it about a week ago, and I do apologize I haven't got to it yet, but I will get it to it, I promise. Talk a little bit about all the things that your Facebook page. Please tell me about your Facebook page.
The Facebook page for ourselves is actually still under construction.
Oh, okay.
But it will be, kind of up and running quite soon. It will be Paul and Kit Garratt-Proctor.
Okay.
The name.
Okay.
Initially, we're supporting this Amityville Gateway to Evil.
Mm-hmm.
I am currently working on a non-fiction book that is giving out different theories around the subject. And in time, there will be another fictional offering around Amityville that we work on together.
Now,
So that's in addition to a number of other projects.
great. Now, people can get your book off of Amazon. Once again, the book is called Amityville, Gateway of Evil. Paul and Kit Garratt-Proctor were our guests tonight. And I do thank you for coming on. Is there any other things that you would like to plug, guys?
As regards to adding to this, I would always encourage anyone who is wishing to look into this story, please check all angles, all views, before reaching a conclusion.
I agree. I agree. You have to look at all the views. So once again, I thank Paul and Kit for coming on tonight. And as usual, boys and girls, boo.